Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 96.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 96 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Today's guest is Yehuda Remer. Yehuda is author of Safety On, 10 Little Liberals, and the ABCs of Guns. And now, here's Yehuda. Yehuda Remer, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Yehuda, you've published 4 books now. Would you tell us a little about those?
Sure. I've published 4 books. The first one that came out was a book called Safety On. It's an introduction to the world of firearms for children. There is no political leaning, no bias at all. It's literally a book about gun safety, nothing more. The second book I came out with was actually a coloring book version of Safety On. That way children can actually immerse themselves into the story and really internalize the messages of gun safety. My third book is a book called The ABCs of Guns. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a picture book. A is for ammunition and AR-15. B is for barrel and bipod. So that's the ABCs of Guns. And then my fourth book is actually a satirical book, nothing to do with guns, called 10 Little Liberals. And it's kind of a take on the snowflake mentality that we see raging across the country today.
Wow, great. And so I guess we'll start with the most recent one. Did you have an age range in mind? Is that a book for adults, or is that still sort of a children's book, or did you have?
So you're saying for Safety On?
Oh, I'm sorry. For 10 Little Liberals.
Oh, 10 Little Liberals is actually not really a children's book.
Okay.
Yeah, it kind of stemmed when I used to write for Ben Shapiro on one of his older websites, not the Daily Wire. And at the time, I'm a millennial at the tail end, but I'm a millennial, and I was kind of getting annoyed with, all the, the snowflake mentality of whining and crying about everything when, I tell my kids, if something doesn't go your way, you just cowboy up and push on. So that's my mentality. So I kind of just started writing a satirical book, a little picture book for more of a coffee table style book, just kind of making fun of that snowflake mentality because it was driving me crazy.
Wow. And did you illustrate it as well? The illustrators are very nice.
Thank you. No, I cannot draw a stick figure if my life depended on it. I'm a horrible artist. I actually found a designer in Western Ukraine on a freelance website, and he has done all 4 of my books. He's done 2 logos for me, and I have a t-shirt company right now, and he's done every single design. So he is absolutely phenomenal to work with.
Wow. Great. So what inspired you to write the gun safety book?
So I grew up in Los Angeles, and the way I saw America's gun culture growing up was, 3 people had guns. You had police officers, military personnel, and bad guys. I grew up in a very apolitical home, and the thought or the notion of personal firearm ownership never even occurred to me. I didn't even know what the Second Amendment was. I mean, I heard about it, but I kind of took for granted the country. When I was about 23, a buddy of mine called me up. He said, "Hey, let's go shooting." And I went, absolutely loved it. Got the itchy trigger finger to get into firearms, and I did. At the time, I was married with 2 kids, and I kind of kept the fact that I owned firearms for my parents, even though, like I said, I was out of the house, for no other reason than I'm an Orthodox Jew, and whenever you hear about that Jewish mother's guilt. It is true. So I kind of didn't want to deal with that. So I didn't tell them. And then one day my younger brother let slip that I owned a Glock. And my parents went nuts. I mean, they were yelling at me, calling me, it's so irresponsible to own firearms with children in the house. God forbid, what happens if they get one? And they, for weeks, they just didn't stop hounding me. And I was thinking to myself, like, here I am, responsible enough to get married, responsible enough to raise a child, but not responsible enough to own a tool in my home. And I went online and I wanted to buy a book that I can sit down with my children and read to them. Not a pamphlet, not a printout, an actual book. And I was blown away that there was nothing like it on the market. There was no children's book where a child can either sit down by themselves, a child who's just beginning to read, or a parent being able to read a book to a child. There was nothing like that on the market. So I was like, ooh, I've always enjoyed writing, so I'm gonna write a book. And I didn't think it was ever gonna happen, but 5 years after I started writing it, I finally got a publishing deal, and it came out in January of 2017. So, in other words, I kind of started writing it almost, I hate to say it like this, but almost to shut my parents up, to leave me alone. But that's really the story of how it came to be.
And so it took 5 years, and there really was a void in the market there. I guess on one hand I'm surprised, but on the other hand, not that it took that long to get someone to publish that for you.
Well, I've noticed that the publishing world tends to be a lot more left-leaning than, I mean, you obviously have your conservative books out there, and money is money, but the literary world a lot of times tends to be a little more left-leaning. So I was turned down by, God, probably over 30 publishing companies, probably the same amount of literary agents. And I finally found a small company after 5 years. Especially, the book came out in 2017. I started writing it, I believe, in about 2011, 2012. And at the time I first started marketing it is when Newtown happened. And, after that, there was just no conceivable way that my book was going to get published because of Newtown. But, I persevered, I pushed on, and I had a dream. And beauty about our country is if you have a dream and you work hard enough, it could come, could happen.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned your parents being, kind of shocked and appalled about you owning firearms. I guess I've had the impression that it was, I guess, more common in the Orthodox community to be in favor of firearms ownership. Am I wrong there, or?
No. So firearm ownership, I would say in the Orthodox community, in Orthodox Judaism, what I found, and I obviously I don't have any stats to prove this, but this is just what I found. You either have Jews who are, hey, we love guns, we own guns, but they're not really vocal about it, but among their little close-knit group of gun-owning friends they are. You either have that, or you have other Jews who tend to be more, we understand why we have the Second Amendment. We support your right to own a firearm. We just don't want to have anything to do with firearms. So, you're right. A majority of Orthodox Jews do support guns and the Second Amendment, but at the same time, a lot of them just don't want to have anything to do with firearms. I have plenty of friends who are on the fence about purchasing their first gun. They're just afraid to do it because, the whole safety protocols and having children in the home. And I've talked to them, but obviously I can't push them to do it. It's when they're ready, they're ready. But a lot of them are pro-gun. Doesn't mean all of them are. I mean, I've had plenty of run-ins with Orthodox Jews who think I'm a total whack job because I own and carry firearms with me everywhere I go. So it's definitely interesting dynamics.
Yeah. Uh, and so you mentioned growing up in LA, and I imagine if you're carrying, you're not in LA now. So how did growing up in LA have I guess, like a leftist influence on your, on your thinking, on your life, did you, I guess, escape that later, or, I'm not
Um,
asking a very good question, sorry.
no, I definitely I hear what you're asking. I would say no. The real influence was the fact that I just grew up apolitical. So I always heard that Jews were Democrats. So growing up, I always thought I was a Democrat. It wasn't until, like I said, about 22, 23 years old when I first began learning about politics and actually paying attention. It was, I guess 2008 when Obama was running for his first term, when I first started getting into it, reading about politics, getting into the Constitution, the Second Amendment. I found myself agreeing with a lot of it. Truth matter is it all stemmed. I was listening to FM, one of the biggest FM radio stations in LA at the time. I was going to work in the morning, and like I said, I think I was 22 or 23, and the DJs were talking about male genitalia, and I'm sitting there listening to it, and I felt brain cells in my head exploding one by one. I mean, I felt myself getting stupider by the second, and I kind of turned on AM radio, switched to the AM, and I found myself over the course of the next year nodding my head, saying, "Well, that makes perfect sense. That's just common sense. Why would we not do it that way? Or why would they be doing it the other way? That doesn't make sense." And before I knew it, I just realized, I'm like, wait, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not even a Republican. I'm like a 3% Tea Party, all right wing, type of guy. Just because it made sense to me. And luckily I did have once when I started getting into politics, I did grow up with Ben Shapiro, so I was, before he became what he is now, I was texting him 1,000 times a day. What's this mean? What's that mean? And he would explain everything to me. And I like to call myself a Ben Shapiro disciple. And thankfully growing up in LA didn't give me those left leaning tendencies, but I was able to get out of LA about 4 years ago. My wife and kids, we all live in Texas now, so little freedom.
Yeah. Right. So you mentioned you first experienced shooting when a friend invited you to go with him, and it's something that's come up a lot when I ask people how they, what they recommend for trying to get people out of the middle and help people overcome their bias against firearms. Since then, do you have any insight as to what it takes to move someone from the middle or from the anti-side to the pro-gun side?
Great question. I would say the first thing has to be just I guess, respecting their opinion as much as you might disagree with their opinions of, I hate guns, no one should have guns, we should ban all guns. Respecting their opinion and trying to explain to them that it really comes down to education. That most, I can't say most, but I know of a lot of anti-gunners who have never gone shooting before. And offering them to, hey, look, the range is on me, let's go for an hour to the range, let's see how you like it. You'd be surprised, a lot of them will take you up on it. But at the same time, a lot of them are just vehemently against it, and obviously there's no changing those people. But I would say just a healthy respect to one another, try to keep it civil, and try to explain to them that really what it comes down to is education. And if you can go back and forth with ideas why one might be anti, the other one is pro, definitely could have an impact on their mindset.
Thank you. So how can people find you? What's the best way for them to find more about you, find the books, things like that?
So I've got two websites. First one is YehudaRemer.com, and that's just all about my books and all about a lot of my interviews that I've done over the course of the last 2 years, and just a little more information about me. The other website I have is actually thepewpewjew.com, and it's just something that a lot of my friends in the industry gave me this moniker, the Pew Pew Jew, and I'm kind of capitalizing on it, and I just have a great bunch of t-shirts, and people can get signed books there, stuff like that.
Oh, great. Yeah, I found YehudaRemer.com. I didn't find the Pew Pew Jew, though, so I will check that one out.
Great.
All right. Well, Yehuda, I thank you so much for being on the show. Any parting words for our listeners?
Wow. I love when hosts do that. It always puts you on the spot, and for some reason you're never prepared for it. I guess I'm going to guess most of your listeners are very much like me, but at the end of the day, just remember a gun is nothing more than a tool, and it's really how you use it God, I'm so exhausted. I really apologize. My baby was up so early. Determines, the way people are going to see firearm owners. So just remember it's a tool, and be careful with it, just like with any other tools you might have around the home.
Well, I thank you very much for being on the show, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thanks again for tuning in to episode 96 of the Out of Order Gun Rights podcast. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/96. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.